while improving access to essential medicines, particularly in low and middle income countries, LMICs. With a focus on collaboration and accountability, we spoke to Jayasree K, with the Chief Executive Officer of Access to Medicine Foundation, for more.
Pharmaceutical companies should ensure that they are really using need and the burden of disease to know the real number of patients who need access to treatment and match that to their products. I mean, if they know the need and they serve communities based on that, then we will actually be bridging the gaps in health equity a lot better. Companies should not be basing access on willingness to pay and not only access the rich populations in countries.
And what are some of the key factors that you are seeing preventing pharmaceutical companies from tracking patient reach and also for all essential medicines and in all relevant regions?
So I think first off, it's the willingness themselves of the pharmaceutical industry to apply patient reach approaches across the entire business. But in reality, there's also a lack of data on patient reach available, especially in community-based and outpatient treatments itself. Partners of the pharmaceutical industry themselves don't often measure or monitor this either. And that leads to many gaps of not necessarily knowing which patients need access to treatments. Companies also sell products. So their primary value is revenue generated sales data. And at best, they'll be doses delivered at a particular location at a point of sale. So if companies want to ensure that they're really reaching communities beyond that point of sale, they need to embed patient reach approaches in their delivery and distribution contracts and look for better data, embed these principles and approaches across the disease pipeline and across their business, across all the countries that they actually are operating and be able to deliver on some of their goals.
And yes, data is indeed key when it comes to expanding businesses at the same time. It's a give and take. They all intertwine. But let us look at a disparity that we are seeing in insulin access for most of the patients here. So how best can companies balance financial goals with expanding access to essential medicines in these regions?
So, I mean, just take the example of insulin access itself. There's projected to be at least 55 million people that's going to be living with diabetes in the African continent by 2045. And of that, more than 50% of people living with diabetes actually go underdiagnosed and untreated in Africa. So if you're a company that actually is producing insulin, and one of the few companies, because there's only a handful of companies that produce life-saving insulin to treat, for example, type 1 diabetes, then you have to do a lot in your power to reach patients globally. It is part of your business operations to ensure that you're performing also on reach across many of the geographies that you're already active in. And you can already see that the demand is particularly growing for better treatments, for quality medicines and affordable medicines to be made available in countries itself. So companies need to find a way to access more patients and also, generate more revenues from untapped emerging markets in Sub-Saharan Africa and across the world. And in that way, balance their portfolio, their ability itself. I mean, at the end, the vision of a pharmaceutical company leader should be to ensure that every patient in the world has access to their life-saving products itself. So exercising that vision is important here.
And yes, we also see the aspect of funding, which is very crucial. So then how do we tap into private sector investments into healthcare and also at the same time ensuring that these investments are just not investments, but at the same time, they're prioritizing patient access and affordability?
There, I think it's to both sides need to act, right? So the pharmaceutical companies and private sector organizations such as hospital and pharmacy chains all need to invest in healthcare and equitable quality healthcare in that regard. And at the same time, we need to see an increase in government spending on healthcare itself, especially in reimbursement, as many people in Sub-Saharan Africa and around the world pay out of pocket for treatments itself. So you do need to see that you need to leverage sort of the power of investors that invest in the pharmaceutical industry themselves investing in global access, and governments investing more in order for us to bridge this gap. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of political will, stronger commitments and ambitions, and really addressing needs from the get-go.
And when it comes to some of the challenges and opportunities for collaboration, what are we seeing here in terms of the, among us, the pharmaceutical companies, governments, and even stakeholders to improve this access to insulin?
So I think one of the biggest problems is just a fatigue in terms of how much needs to be invested in every country or region itself, because approaches need to be tailored by the pharmaceutical companies and their partners to really address the need in particular geographies itself. So if you're, for example, active in one region in Kenya, expanding to other regions requires more investments, more commitment, and the work's still not done in the original region itself. So when the need is so great, it sometimes feels extremely daunting, and companies need to put a lot more investments to make that happen. And sometimes that willpower, the political will, the availability of financing is not all there at the same time to make that happen. But beyond this, I think the vision and the ambition of the pharma industry and governments should be to protect people and to ensure that there is broader access. So I do think that having a stronger commitment to reach patients that are really in need, it can be done. And we've shown some examples in our recent report on what can be done about it. We will also be publishing something called the Access to Medicine Index, which is a biennial report. And that will include examples, best practices, and how the pharmaceutical companies enable broader access to over 80 diseases and conditions, products for the 80 diseases and conditions across the world itself in November.
Indeed, and just to tap into that, how then do we ensure that pharmaceutical companies refine their commitments to expand patient reach in these countries to ensure that they address a more significant portion of the disease burden? I know you've mentioned it there, but maybe you can expound a little bit more on this.
Yeah, so I think research insights that we bring forward identify the gap. It also provides a sort of a non-financial incentive for companies to realize this is what their competitors are actually doing about access. I think in our findings itself, we found that 19 out of the 20 companies have approaches on addressing patient need, but it's not broadly applied across their portfolio and across the countries that they're operating in. So there's a way to go. And by identifying these gaps, by making sure that institutional investors that invest in the companies engage on these topics with the companies to say, we expect better, we expect an improvement, and we expect it at a particular time, you can leverage the pharmaceutical industry to improve access broader in more countries and take this issue more seriously.
And that conversation brings the show to a close. But let us continue engaging online on X at CNBC Africa, #BLEA410. And for more news and insights, you can visit our website. That is www.cnbcafrica.com. From me, Tabitha Muthoni and the team, it's a goodbye for now, but stay back for Power Lunch, Southern Africa.
What we're trying to do